Mzwandile Mbeje, who is at the Commission in Parktown, Johannesburg. Mzwai, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through. Let's just go back a little to the events this morning when Jimmy Manyi was wrapping up his testimony, but you know, him basically saying that he wants the evidence leader advocate Vincent Malika to recuse himself, but making a U-turn saying no, it's fine, he can actually continue.
Indeed, Palisa, I think there were certain issues really that he was unhappy about. I mean, he felt that the manner in which the evidence for him was being led was different to other people who had come before the commission. That's why then he felt perhaps Advocate Malika needed to recuse himself. But after a short adjournment, they came to some sort of agreement to say, well, he can continue because Jimmy Manyi himself, rather Mzwandile Mbeje himself, made it clear that he doesn't want to be seen as a stumbling block to the work of the commission. So, and everything continued until the conclusion of his evidence.
Yeah, but from what we understand, Mzwai, Mr. Manyi may have to come back as per what the evidence leader was saying, that there is more research that needs to be done from the National Treasury.
Remember when he gave his evidence yesterday, Mr. Manyi, he spoke about serious corruption at the Treasury of about 1.7 billion, so which he basically said was so massive it does need some sort of attention. So what the evidence leader and the judge himself did was that they gave him assurance that given that he had given them that kind of information, they were going to follow it up, and then they would want him to be available in case they need further documents or evidence really to be able to probe what he had said. I mean, he had spoken about 1.7 billion rand at Treasury, so that is quite massive given the scope of what is happening at the Commission right here. The Commission can't really ignore such evidence if indeed it is true. That is why it made an undertaking to say, well, we'll be able to use our own people to follow this thing up, and then we would want you to be at our disposal should we really need you going forward.
Yeah, and then came the ANC National Chairperson Gwede Mantashe, who is the former SG of the African National Congress, really basing his testimony on the meeting that the African National Congress had with the big banks. Take us through that. Yes,
this is the first of the. They said their evidence will be in 4 parts, so which means this is the first of those parts of their meetings. Remember when the banks came to the commission a couple of weeks ago, so they mentioned the role of the ANC. Remember, everyone was pressuring them to do something, as everyone was fearing that a number of people really were going to lose their jobs. So what the SG, or rather the former SG, said here was that because they did not understand how the banks worked, so they then sought those meetings with the banks to really understand how they operate. Because remember, Palisa, so the governing party can't tell banks what to do because they have their own legislation that governs how they have to do their work. So what the chairperson of the ANC told this commission was that they wanted to really understand how the banks operate. And then after meeting the banks, and of course they were able to be in a much better situation to understand so how they took some of the decisions, because the banks were very clear to say we have to comply with certain legislation. If there are things that we are suspicious or are untoward as banks, we can't just stand aside and look. And particularly because the banks really had contributed in making South Africa one of the countries really that are strong in terms of the institution, in terms of the financial institutions. So then you can't therefore want to weaken or interfere with that kind of institution. So that is the essence of the statement of the ANC here. We know that the president will come at a later stage to give a global picture of their take to this commission. many of the questions that many people would want to ask, so those questions will be answered. Even the role of Mzwandile himself, we were able to actually put a question here to him to say, many people have implicated you, so are you going to come? I mean, he was basically saying, I mean, as the SG of the ANC, you meet a number of people, and as you meet a number of people, so time and again, your name will come up. So we expect that the president of the party at some point will have the opportunity as well to come then and give a proper perspective as to the take of the ANC. And of course, those questions that many people may have would be able then to have answers to.
Yeah. Now, the chairperson of the ANC, Mzwandile, was excused, Mzwai, for today. We do know that the proceedings will continue tomorrow with the former Mineral Resources Minister, Advocate Ngwako Ramatlhodi, and his special advisor, Advocate Mahlodi Moafe. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely, Palisa. You remember that at some point he was the Minister of Mineral Resources, and of course the issue when they were fired, and then the issue of how the Guptas perhaps wanted to have a say in how certain things were done, so will in all likelihood come up. But as I can understand or predict, so we'll perhaps get to hear more details insofar as what is it that they tried to do, particularly in that department. Remember, Palisa, that when the former DG of Treasury, Lungisa Fuzile, was giving his evidence earlier this week, he said Minister Van Rooyen came, when he met Minister Van Rooyen at his office, there were 3 people. And those 3 people, remember, is Popat, who was to be the special advisor, and Ian Watley, who was to be a chief of staff. But then there was a 3rd person, Amy Mabaso. So upon investigating, it was discovered that Mr. Mabaso used to work for Mineral Resources. So we may then be able to connect the dots in terms of what exactly was happening and what is it that he tried to do, as the Commission really tries to dig deep into finding out what this phenomenon called state capture is.
All right, I suppose wait and see what transpires tomorrow. Mzwai, thank you so much for that update. SABC senior reporter Mzwandile Mbeje reporting live from the State Capture Inquiry in Parktown, Johannesburg.